In August 2012, warehouse inspector Michel Gauvreau walked through the massive storage facility in St. Louis de Blanford, Quebec, performing what he thought would be a routine inventory check. This wasn't just any warehouse. This was Canada's Fort Knox, the global strategic maple syrup reserve, holding millions of dollars worth of the country's most precious natural resource. As Gauvreau inspected the endless rows of blue barrels stacked floor to ceiling, something felt terribly wrong. He lifted one barrel. Too light. He opened it and stared in disbelief. Water. Just water. He rushed to check another barrel. Water again. And another. And another. What Gauvreau had just discovered would become the largest theft in Canadian history, a crime so audacious and perfectly executed that it would shock the entire nation and reveal a hidden world most people never knew existed. To understand this incredible heist, you need to understand something crucial about Canada. Maple syrup isn't just a breakfast topping here. It's serious business. Quebec produces 70% of the world's maple syrup, worth over $500 million annually. The industry is so valuable that Canada created the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers, essentially an OPEC for maple syrup. This organization controls production, sets prices, and maintains the global strategic maple syrup reserve. Yes, Canada has a strategic reserve of maple syrup, just like countries have strategic oil reserves. The warehouse in St. Louis de Blanford held over 10 million pounds of syrup, worth approximately $30 million. In the world of organized crime, maple syrup had become more valuable per gallon than crude oil. A single barrel could fetch $1,200 on the black market. The heist didn't happen overnight. Between 2011 and 2012, a carefully orchestrated criminal operation executed one of the most ingenious crimes ever committed. The mastermind was Richard Valliere, a maple syrup dealer who knew the industry inside and out. He understood the system, knew the security measures, and recognized the massive opportunity sitting in that warehouse. But Valliere couldn't do this alone. He recruited Etienne St-Pierre, a warehouse employee who had insider access, and several accomplices who would help transport and sell the stolen syrup. Their plan was brilliantly simple, yet incredibly risky. They would enter the warehouse during off hours, drain the barrels of syrup, refill them with water to maintain the correct weight, and reseal them perfectly. The barrels would sit on shelves looking completely normal while the real syrup disappeared into the black market. St-Pierre provided access to the warehouse and crucial information about security schedules and inventory checks. Night after night, the crew arrived at the facility with trucks, pumps, and empty containers. They worked in darkness, moving silently through the warehouse aisles. Using portable pumps, they drilled small holes in the barrels, drained the thick golden syrup into large containers, then carefully refilled each barrel with water. To ensure the barrels weighed approximately the same, they calculated the exact amount of water needed. After resealing the barrels, they placed them back on the shelves, indistinguishable from the untouched ones. The operation was exhausting and dangerous. Maple syrup is thick and heavy. Each barrel weighed over 600 pounds when full. Moving thousands of these barrels without detection required incredible coordination. But the payoff was enormous. Every night of successful theft meant hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit. As months passed, the thieves grew bolder. What started as a careful, selective operation became increasingly ambitious. They weren't stealing dozens of barrels, they were stealing thousands. By the time authorities discovered the crime, over 3,000 tons of maple syrup had vanished. To put this in perspective, 3,000 tons equals roughly 9,571 barrels of maple syrup. If you loaded all that syrup into tanker trucks, you would need dozens of vehicles. The thieves had essentially emptied an Olympic-sized swimming pool full of liquid gold, one barrel at a time, and replaced it with water. The total value of the stolen syrup exceeded 18 million Canadian dollars, making it the largest theft in Canadian history, surpassing major bank robberies and art heists. But stealing the syrup was only half the challenge. The thieves needed to sell 3,000 tons of stolen maple syrup, and that isn't like selling stolen jewelry. They needed buyers who wouldn't ask questions and a distribution network that could handle massive quantities. The stolen syrup was sold to buyers across Quebec and exported to the United States and other countries. Some syrup was sold directly to small distributors who operated outside the Federation's control. Other batches were mixed with legitimate syrup to disguise their origins. The black market for maple syrup was surprisingly robust. Many small producers resented the Federation's strict quotas and price controls. Some were willing to buy cheaper, off-the-books syrup, even if its origins were suspicious. When Gavreau discovered those water-filled barrels in August 2012, he immediately contacted authorities. The Quebec Provincial Police launched an investigation codenamed Project Maple. What they uncovered was shocking. This wasn't a simple burglary. This was organized crime operating at the highest level. Investigators began surveillance operations, tracking suspicious shipments and monitoring known syrup dealers. Financial records were subpoenaed. Phone lines were tapped. Slowly, the police pieced together the network of thieves, buyers, and accomplices. The investigation revealed how vulnerable the warehouse had been. Despite holding tens of millions of dollars in product, security was minimal. Barrels were rarely inspected individually. Inventory checks were infrequent. The thieves had exploited these weaknesses perfectly. As evidence mounted, police identified Richard Valliere at the center of everything. In December 2012, Quebec Provincial Police executed coordinated raids across the province. Officers descended on homes, warehouses, and businesses simultaneously. Richard Valliere was arrested at his home. Etienne Saint-Pierre was taken into custody. In total, 16 people were arrested in connection with the heist. The arrests made international headlines. News outlets around the world covered the story with a mix of disbelief and amusement. Canadian maple syrup heist became a viral sensation. Late-night talk show hosts joked about it. The story seemed almost too bizarre to be true, yet it was completely real. During the raids, police recovered approximately 600 tons of stolen syrup, worth about $2 million. But the majority of the syrup, over 2,400 tons, worth more than $16 million, was gone, already sold and consumed around the world. The trial of Richard Valliere and his accomplices began in 2016, nearly 4 years after the arrests. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, including financial records, surveillance footage, testimony from accomplices who agreed to cooperate, and a clear paper trail linking Valliere to the crime. Valliere maintained his innocence initially, but eventually pled guilty to theft and fraud charges. In 2017, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison and ordered to pay a massive fine of 9.4 million Canadian dollars, the largest financial penalty ever imposed in a Canadian theft case. Etienne Saint-Pierre received a shorter sentence after cooperating with authorities. The Federation of Quebec maple syrup producers faced intense scrutiny. Critics argued their monopolistic control created the black market conditions that enabled the heist. The organization was forced to implement stricter security measures, including more frequent inspections, better surveillance systems, and improved inventory tracking. The Great Maple Syrup Heist remains one of the most unusual and audacious crimes in modern history. It exposed a hidden world where maple syrup is traded like precious commodities. Today, the warehouse in Saint Louis de Blanford still operates with significantly enhanced security. The Federation continues to control Quebec's maple syrup production. The heist proved something remarkable. In the right circumstances, anything can become valuable enough to steal. Even something as sweet and innocent as maple syrup can become liquid gold worth risking everything for. And in the annals of crime history, the Great Maple Syrup Heist will forever stand as the sweetest robbery ever pulled off.